U.S. President Donald Trump says the Israel-Hamas ceasefire is still in place despite Gaza strikes. Israel launched strikes against Hamas after blaming the group for a lethal ambush that left 2 soldiers dead. Israel also says it has halted the transfer of aid into Gaza until further notice.
Well, we're going to have to see what's happening. We want to make sure that it's going to be very peaceful with Hamas. And as you know, they've been quite rambunctious. They've been doing some shooting, and we think maybe the leadership isn't involved in that. Some rebels within. But either way, it's going to be handled properly.
Let's go to Jerusalem now and speak with Bloomberg's Dan Williams. So once again, an intensification of violence over the weekend, Dan. I guess the question is the ceasefire still actually holding?
The simple answer is yes, although it faced its most serious threat this weekend. That ceasefire, as you know, is only 10 days old, and it's not a deal in itself, although a momentous achievement in terms of what it brought to Israelis and Palestinians and the prestige it brought to President Trump, the architect. The ceasefire is meant to lead to a much wider deal, a much more permanent deal, a peace deal, a Middle East peace deal, as envisaged by Trump. That may be a tall order, and it would seem that preserving the ceasefire may also be a tall order. For now, it's intact, but for about 12 hours over Sunday, it really did feel like it was a threat, with the killing of those 2 soldiers, wounding of another in a Palestinian attack that the Israelis blamed on Hamas, and drawing retaliatory airstrikes by Israel across the Gaza Strip, dozens of them, killing, we're told, dozens of Palestinians. Israel says the targets were Hamas targets, including a tunnel that had been used for hostages. However, it ended with the Israelis saying they are back at the ceasefire. Hamas says it respects the ceasefire and is committed to it. And it would appear that the Americans feel fairly satisfied that they've drawn a line under this sorry episode.
Yes, well, the Americans clearly, and President Trump himself has a vested interest in keeping the ceasefire going. What efforts are the U.S., and there's a U.S. delegation heading to the region again this week, are they undertaking to ensure that the ceasefire remains in place?
First of all, there's the status of the delegation. We're told that not just Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the senior envoys who've been regular visitors to this part of the world in recent months. Apparently, the U.S. Vice President, J.D. Vance, is also planning to come. Now, that hasn't been confirmed by the White House yet, but the very fact it's being discussed would signal U.S. seriousness about preserving this deal and finding a way to prod it ahead. In parallel, the various stakeholders, regional powers, European powers who've signed on to Trump's peace plan are setting up a task force, a group of military officers whose job is to monitor progress on the ceasefire, monitor progress toward implementation of the deal. A lot of moving parts, a lot of players there, a lot of disparate actions with senior players trying to synthesize it in the hope that a good conclusion will be brought about more or less as set out in that Trump peace plan.